Welcome to a very special edition of Crawford County Outdoors. I'm Duane and very excited to have Brenda Costa with us today. Brenda, what's over our shoulder over there?
Well, I'm excited to be out here today. We are at our Joe Cat launch, and we are in 5th Ward of Meadville.
So I know I worked with Joe's wife, Joy, for many, many years, and that's an awesome thing that they were able to make this launch here. So we're right by where I used to play softball for many, many years.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The Catalano family worked for a number of years to raise the funds to put this launch on our Smock Riverwalk property here, and it's a wonderful place for people to access the creek.
Well, when you and I did our show back in January, February, whatever,
yeah, it's been a while.
French Creek was picked as the River of the Year, so I've just been dying to get out here and get on the water and go float down and see some of the more Meadville area, Meadville area kind of stuff. We're going to go from the 5th Ward launch here now up to the Minnesota Path and full kind of stuff. One thing I like to do on the working outdoor show is craft things. So I made some.
Oh my goodness!
So you think you can use that today?
Beautiful! Absolutely! Thank you so much!
This is from an ash tree that it's almost ready to fall in our yard. And ash used to be kayak paddles, canoe paddles, and baseball bats, whatever. And it's got to be gone. There's not going to be any ash wood left. And her friend had some walnut, so we got a strip of walnut there.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, an invasive species, the emerald ash borer, is taking out the ash trees in our area, but I appreciate this. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Good. Well, let's hit the water.
All right. We got a beautiful day.
I was just going to say, we got the perfect day for this, didn't we?
Yep.
Hey, let me ask you about the 120. I saw on the Facebook several times you talked about 120, and that's temperature, right?
Yes. So we find that when it finally is time to start paddling in the spring, sometimes people are out on the water when maybe the conditions aren't safe. We might have a warm day, but people aren't necessarily accounting for the water temperature. So a rule of thumb is to add up the water temperature and the air temperature, and that should equal 120 degrees. Below that,
or
you're probably at risk for
120 or more.
Yeah, definitely.
And even if maybe you had, we had a couple 70 degree days early on, but the water was still like 40 or whatever.
Yeah,
so
we did. And it's important for people to know the conditions of the water. A lot of times people are making their decision by, is it a sunny day? And sure, you want to paddle on a sunny day, but if the water's too cold, if you're not prepared for cold water paddling, if the water's too high, you're really putting yourself at risk. And there were a lot of emergency calls last year, a record number of emergency calls on French Creek, and we'd really like to prevent that from happening again. So we'd like people to just be a little more informed about the conditions of the creek and when they're on the water.
So 120, water temperature plus air temperature, but don't forget, if the water temperature is real low, even if you have a hot day, you still don't want to go if the water's going to be 40 or 45 degrees or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter when, you should always be prepared to get in the water. You might find conditions that you aren't aware of, and you could end up dumping in the creek any day. So you need to be prepared with dry clothes, a towel, some food and water. You can't always think that the conditions are going to be perfect when you're out.
We had just a real brief storm yesterday, but the water's really moving fast today. Is that because of the extra water from the storm?
It is moving fast, but I get an alert on my phone when the water's below 3 feet, and it is today. So the water didn't go up a lot, but it does seem like it's moving a little quick this morning.
Looks like somebody's got a little swing there, jump out and dive in the water.
Yeah, nice rope swing.
That's fun. Coming up on Spring Street Bridge here. Seems like I cross over this one maybe not every single day, but almost every day. And I always look to see how the water's doing,
Yeah, it's interesting. We have some major bridges in town, and a lot of people drive across French Creek and maybe don't give it a lot of thought. But it really is an incredible waterway, and people don't realize it's literally nationally and internationally renowned for its biodiversity, but maybe if you drive over it every day, you take it for granted.
And it's a whole different look of the world here from here than it is from driving over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I mean, today we're going to be going through the heart of Meadville, probably the most industrialized, developed section of the creek. But even here, you find a number of species of fish, freshwater mussels. You know, there's been decades and decades of industrial development here, but this is still a pretty healthy waterway.
Is that a loon right there? Two of them. I thought maybe they jump in and ride with us.
I'm hoping we'll see a whole variety of species today. Since it's so sunny, we might see some turtles.
I swear almost every time I've ever come down the creek, I've run into an eagle. I came out a few weeks back just to kind of get a run in, and three eagles we saw that day. Two osprey and one bald eagle.
Yeah, so I paddled this same section 2 weeks ago, and we saw both juvenile and mature bald eagles. We saw muskrat, deer, a number of turtle species, ducks, geese. It's amazing. It's just amazing. I see something new almost every time.
I think I also saw ducks and geese, and I saw a beaver. And it's like, you're not going to block this creek with a tree down there, Mr. Beaver.
Right. We've got some log jams going up north of here right now that we need to see if we can get those cleared out, make the conditions a little safer. But down here, we're pretty clear.
When you see a log in the water or a tree down in the water, you kind of want to steer clear of it, right? You don't want to get too close because you can get hung up. You can get hung up in that, right?
Absolutely. So those are called strainers, and you can very easily get hung up on them. And if you are seeing the tree above the water, there's definitely a portion of the tree that's below the water, which can be a hazard that you can't see and you need to really steer clear of. They're called strainers because they strain the stuff out of the water, including the people. So, got to be careful.
When we strain the pasta for dinner at my house, it's like I always think about that.
Yeah.
The water goes through, but the other stuff doesn't go through.
That's
yeah.
right.
So you don't want to be a piece of spaghetti, I guess.
Right. And that's where, again, it's important to be aware of the water level when you're out on the creek. There are websites online where you can check and see what the water level is at stream gauges anytime, any day. But you don't want to be on the water when it's too high because there will be a lot of those hazards that are submerged and you're really creating some danger. And the water is moving faster when the water's higher. So you really need to stay off the creek when the water's really high. My personal rule of thumb is to not be on the creek if the Meadville stream gauge is above 5 feet. I don't know if that's my own personal threshold, but above that, you're getting into some dangerous conditions.
And that one gets measured down at the Mead Avenue Bridge, right?
Yeah, there's a USGS gauge at the Mead Avenue Bridge. There are also gauges in Cambridge Springs, Utica, and Union City.
Okay.
So there's a lot of places online you can check and see what the creek conditions are. And French Creek is really reactive to precipitation. So there's times where if we've had a heavy rain, the creek can go up 4 or 5 feet overnight. So you never want to assume that the conditions are safe, and you never want to assume that they're the same as they were last time you paddled.
Coming up on the railroad bridge here. Looking at these trees off to my right here, really just partly in the water and partly out of the water, and a lot of the roots exposed. Can you sort of tell when the tree's gonna drop? I mean, does it just kind of happen?
For the most part, it's just going to happen. But you know, those trees are incredibly important. That's the riparian buffer, the trees and the bushes and vegetation that are on the bank. They help to stabilize the bank, keep the creek banks from eroding, and they sort of filter water as it comes overland if we have a lot of precipitation. But it's really important to have those riparian buffers with lots of vegetation to stabilize the bank. If those trees with those big root systems weren't there, that bank would erode pretty quickly. And it's interesting when you think about French Creek and when it's near flood stage, when we have these ice jams, January, February, and the creek is at its highest, it is 9 feet higher than it is right now.
Wow.
10 feet higher. So imagine 10 feet above us of water. I mean, this is a pretty powerful river when it's really flowing.
I'm looking at the railroad bridge down there, and it's got to be a good 12, 15 feet up. But the bridge beyond it there looks like 10 feet's going to be like real close to the bottom of that bridge.
Yeah, actually flood stage is about a foot below that Mead Avenue
Wow.
bridge.
Okay.
This property on our right is owned by the Conservancy. This is our Cussawago Island property, and this is the land that's between Cussawago Creek and main stem of French Creek here. We'll get down to the confluence in a little bit, but this is a really nice property. A lot of people like to sneak on there and go fishing. It is open to the public, not for camping, but you're welcome to walk around, fish, do some bird watching. It's a nice property.
Are there paths and things in there that you can kind of follow some paths?
There are deer paths. There are not improved paths,
Okay.
but there's plenty of natural paths in there to walk around.
Okay.
We have a big project coming up next year. We will be removing the Cussawago Dam that is a little ways upstream
I
on
remember that.
Cussawago
Okay.
Creek.
Okay.
So we're excited to get that taken out. Removing low-head dams like that is really important for fish passage and for freshwater mussel habitat. So it'll be interesting to see the benefits once the dam's removed.
Oh, I hear the Lincoln recycling machines moving over there. I see a big pile of, looks like old metal.
Yep. Definitely some industrial history along this corridor, but
One good thing about the metal being right there is it's not in the creek.
that's right.
We don't have to fish it out on cleanup day, right?
Yeah, and the metal we do find on French Creek Cleanup Day goes to Lincoln Recycling.
Okay.
And they are generous sponsors of our event to help us try to clean the creek up. So,
And it can be used for other things. I mean,
yeah,
that metal can be made back into other stuff.
right?
I remember when this bridge was being rebuilt, that was shut down for what, several years?
Yes.
While the construction was in process?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was part of that project was doing a freshwater mussel survey.
Oh, okay.
So they had to inventory what freshwater mussel species were here and make sure that they weren't going to be adversely impacted by the bridge construction. So over there to the right is where Cussawago Creek comes into French Creek, and it's one of 10 major tributaries
Wow, and
within
looks
the
like
watershed, and it contributes about 10% of the flow of French Creek.
looks like we've got that situation you mentioned before there.
There's a tree down there, definitely. Cussawago Creek, only portions of it are paddleable and only at certain times of the year. It can be a really neat, serene paddle on the right conditions, but there's a lot of trees down in there.
Looks like Mother Nature put a strainer right at the end there.
That's right.
I couldn't tell what kind of tree that was, but it still had leaves on, so apparently that says to me it hasn't been down there that long.
Right.
And we're coming up on the Bicentennial Park here and the Bicentennial launch.
We're so fortunate we have a lot of places to access the creek. French Creek Valley Conservancy is the manager of French Creek as an official Pennsylvania water trail, and we'd like to have some more launches so things are a little closer together. But certainly here in Meadville, we have a couple in a row. It's nice so people can put in like this and have a short paddle, but some nice facilities to be able to use.
And there's Route 102 right to our right there.
I gotta get used to this beautiful paddle you made me.
I make them a little bit longer because that helps for turning and stuff when you're doing this kind of paddling.
It's really light. I appreciate it.
That's one thing about the ash wood that I find very helpful is it's strong but it's light, and so I laminated in strips there. So I made myself a canoe paddle years ago, and it had a little knot in the one spot, and it cracked right there. The first time I was using it, so it's a decoration now. It's not an actual paddle. So I'm thinking, Lara, let's do the lamination because those little knots always show up.
Yeah.
And then when you have several strips glued together, that makes up for that.
Well, it's the strength of ash wood is why they make baseball bats out of it, isn't it?
Oh yeah. When you see the Major League ball games now, they use maple, and chunks of the bats are flying into the crowd, and they explode. I'm not sure why they switched, but I don't think they're going to be able to do ash wood anymore. Right?
No.
It's probably just going to be unavailable here pretty soon. So when you're heading down the creek and you see a little spot where all of a sudden it's just kind of like a little bubbly, like over there to your left, does that mean there's something close to the surface, a log or a rock or something that's right not too far under the water? Is that what that means?
Yeah, when you're trying to read the water should look pretty flat and glassy. There's a breeze today, so it's not exactly flat, but if you see ripples, then there very well may be something under the water. A tree, a rock, a tire.
So
you never know.
So you probably want to steer away from it.
Yeah.
That's going to be the best thing, is to move away from it a little bit.
That's right.
I see up in front of us looks like some white water there. That's like a gravelly area, right?
We don't have too many big rapids on French Creek, but this is a fun little section up here.
So we're whitewater kayaking today, huh?
We are.
How about that? All right.
I don't know the class system. I don't know if this even qualifies as class 1, but we'll call it whitewater, Duane.
Perfect. Perfect.
Over here on the left is where Mill Run comes into French Creek. So Mill Run flows all through downtown Meadville, and that's an adventure we have to go on sometime.
Yeah.
Is we'll go up Mill Run underground.
On cleanup day, we did Mill Run one time, and I think I told you fished out 4 shopping carts.
Oh, I bet. We'll see some shopping carts today, probably.
That was kind of fun hitting the white water.
Hopefully that'll be the most wet we get the whole trip.
There's the train bridge.
When you see all these tributaries coming into the creek, like Mill Run and Cusawaga Creek and all these other small creeks, it's important for people throughout the watershed to understand that they're part of the French Creek watershed. The watershed is 1,200 square miles, and so people might live pretty far away from the main stem of French Creek and not realize they're actually part of the watershed, and they impact what happens in French Creek. So we really try to work and explain to people, French Creek goes through 5 counties in 2 states. So a lot of people live in the French Creek watershed.
Now, you and I talked about that before. Well, let's hit it again. when you're fertilizing your lawn and you're putting on weed killer and all that kind of stuff, it is going to end up in French Creek if you overdo it.
Yeah, it is. People don't necessarily think about what washes off their lawn or off their driveway. You know, their truck is leaking oil and it's washing down into the storm drain. Eventually, that storm water, excuse me, the storm water makes its way to French Creek. And we also need to keep in mind that we are the headwaters. This is all going to end up in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right, right.
What we do here impacts everybody downstream from us, so it's important to keep that in mind.
I think I see a goose going down around those little green things sticking up down there. I just saw it. A bird head going around there. And I think I hear a train coming too.
Definitely hear a train.
Well, back in the day in 1853, long before there were any trains, George Washington came up the creek, and that's
1753.
1753.
Yeah.
There's a train.
There we go.
Came to negotiate with the French to try and have everybody follow the rules, because the rule was England had everything below the Great Lakes and France had everything above the Great Lakes. And the French weren't following the rules. They were setting up shop down below here, and
that's right.
Ended up the start of the French and Indian War.
Yeah, George was 21 years old when he came this way. That's a big mission for a 21-year-old.
It's interesting to go to Waterford and see the park, and with the beautiful statue of George Washington there. I really get a kick out of that statue. That's awesome.
Yeah, they have a really nice historical museum in Waterford. Really dedicated people to sharing the history. And it's important also to not start the story with George Washington. You know, this French Creek and this valley was incredibly important to the Native Americans. Really treasured hunting grounds. And you can see why. I mean, it's a really beautiful area.
And back when we're talking that far back, there wasn't a train as an option to move stuff. There wasn't a 18-wheeler to move stuff around. You had a horse and buggy, and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And French Creek was used a lot for transportation of goods. You know, there was a canal system prior to the railroad being developed in the area. There's still traces of the old French Creek feeder canal going through Meadville. So a lock from one of the old canals down near Franklin. A lot of commodities were moved on keel boats through that area. So it's not used for that now, but it really had a pretty significant role prior to the railroad coming to this area.
When you hit 322 between Meadville and Cochranton, you can kind of see where the canal used to be, right?
Yeah.
In a couple spots.
Yeah, a couple places you can still see remnants of it.
And it's interesting, back in the day, whenever that was built, there was not a backhoe, there was not a bulldozer, there was not. So those things were done by hand.
Yeah, that's always amazing to me.
If you think about that.
A lot of people put in a lot of labor building canals by hand.
Well, we're coming up on something that people cross every day in Crawford County. I think that's probably the busiest bridge in Crawford County, I would guess. Smock Bridge.
That's right. And from there, you really can't see the creek very well anymore, so I'm not sure people even think about it as much anymore as they're driving across Smock Bridge. But, you know, again, this is a nice area to be on the water. And the Ernst Trail has now been extended over towards this area, so you can go a little further on the trail. We have a trail easement on our Shryock Bailey property over here on the other side of the bridge, which has allowed for the extension of that trail.
Great. About a year ago, I think it was in June of last year, about a year ago, we did a hike on the trail and talked to a bunch of the folks who were helping develop this new part of the trail. And that was awesome. That was great. And in fact, it's right there. It's just right on the other side of those trees right there.
Yeah, this section of the trail is a challenge because it floods often. but it's nice for people to have a little more trail to be on. And the folks with French Creek Recreational Trails have tried really hard to expand the trail and make that a network of trails for people to use in this area.
When I was a little kid, I went to Neeson Hill School, and people would always ask, "Oh, where's your dad work?" Because that was back in the Leave It to Beaver days when Mom usually didn't work. Mom usually stayed at home. And it was like everybody's dad worked at the Viscos, at Talon, or in the rail
At
yard.
the railroad.
And they were repairing the rail cars, and they worked on the on the rail moving and so on. And I'd always get, "Your dad works at the hospital. Is he a doctor?" So, "No, he's a pharmacist." "What's a pharmacist?" Yeah, so we would always have that conversation. But it's interesting. The railroad's still here, and there are still some folks here that work here.
Yeah.
No more Talon, no more Viscos,
Right.
but there are still industries that require heavy materials coming and going, like channel lock, for example, and which is just right over there.
Absolutely. I mean, rail lines are really important modes of transportation. I wish that there was more passenger rail. My dad, I'm not from this area originally, but my dad was a big railroader, and I rode on trains a lot as a child, so I appreciate those opportunities.
It's really interesting to see Smock Bridge from a whole different perspective than you see it every day or every week whenever you cross over it. It looks like it's intact. I see a little bit of rust up there, but it really looks like it's holding up pretty well.
Thankfully, I think it's pretty stable. So this property over on the right is our Shryock Bailey property. It's behind Costas and the bowling alley, and
Okay.
there's that kind of commercial corridor, but there's this nice natural property behind there and the extension of the trail.
It's interesting, hiking the trail is in a way like here on the creek is you get 5 minutes from where you park the car, and all of a sudden you feel like you're way out in the middle of no place.
Yep.
And here we are just right by the Park Avenue Plaza and the Smock Bridge and the bowling alley and all that kind of stuff. But I think just in a matter of minutes here, we're going to feel like we're way out in the middle of no place.
That's right. You see over on your left, Duane, there's that little concrete tower. My understanding was that was owned by the railroad or installed by the railroad, and I believe it was for telegraph use to communicate down the lines. There's a couple of those that still remain along the creek. And I don't know the exact history of them, but...
Now I see on your side down there a whole flock of geese.
Hopefully we won't upset them and they won't start honking.
I thought maybe they would be afraid of us, but they just kind of walked along the shore there a little bit.
Yeah, they didn't seem too upset.
I thought they'd be spooking and flying and whatever, but interesting. I guess maybe that means maybe we're not the first kayakers that have ever come down here.
Maybe not.
Maybe that's what that means.
We're not intimidating. So if you notice along some of the banks here, Duane, we have an invasive species. This is Japanese knotweed. It's this very tall plant that you find along the banks of French Creek and other creeks. Unfortunately, this is a plant that is probably out of our ability to combat. And people talk about how it's so tall, it's blocking the view of the creek. And unfortunately, it's a very invasive plant. It grows very quickly. It outcompetes the native vegetation. But along the creek banks, if you put the effort in to remove it, then new seed stock just washes.
So since it blocked out other kind of natural things here,
yeah,
and now we're going to have just a muddy bank there that's going to wash away.
Yeah, the knotweed comes up first thing as soon as the weather starts to warm up. it's up and growing. It's probably 6 inches tall before anything else starts.
Wow.
So it blocks out the native vegetation. And it's a species that was brought here as an ornamental species, but unfortunately it's really taken over in some places.
So this is it here with the large leaves?
Yep,
and
that's it.
that's quite a long stretch where it's really...
It grows tall, fast. It's really similar to a bamboo, but if you try to remove it by hand, it actually makes it multiply faster.
Oh, wow.
Because it leaves roots underground. So for now, until somebody comes up with a really good way to combat it, we're going to have that throughout the watershed. And it's everywhere. Lots of people are dealing with that. Now we're going to start getting to the quiet part. Not too far out of town, you really do sort of get lost in nature. Since it's so sunny today, we'll want to keep an eye out in these places where there's bare banks. We'll probably see some turtles. On a day like today, they'll be out sunning.
They enjoy warming up in the sun there? And,
yep.
Okay.
But they seem to be aware of visitors pretty quickly. But I always think they look like pancakes kind of flopping into the water when they sense you coming. A lot of cottonwood on the water.
And where does that come from?
That's just from the trees,
So
but
those are little seeds from the trees?
That's a great allergen.
Okay, okay. So don't inhale one of those, okay.
If you start coughing, it's from inhaling a cottonwood. Oh, there was a turtle just over there. He just slid in. That's not even that sunny of a spot. Maybe we'll see some more.
Was he in that little patch of sunlight? I didn't
There's
see
some
him.
places further up where there's some pretty large cut banks.
Okay.
And I've seen them out there quite often. You'll see both hard shell and soft shell turtle species.
Okay.
Something to keep in mind when you paddle this stretch of the creek and then even further down Wilson Chute to Shaw's Landing. You're
Looks like
very
another-
often paddling into a headwind.
Another little inlet there. Does that one have a name?
I don't know the name of that one. I don't know if it has a name or not.
That's just a little bitty one there.
I don't want to guess because I will be wrong, but I think that is the little tributary that goes under the covered bridge on the Ernst Trail.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things we talked about with the crew is building those bridges. I think there were 3 or 4 new bridges that they built on the, you know, on the, I call it the boot box section of the trail that goes over and ends near the boot box.
Yeah, they've put a tremendous effort into building bridges over there.
But that's a great, yeah.
Unfortunately, because that lower portion that we paddled past right along the creek, that floods, there can be some significant ice buildup there. So they had some bridges that were damaged during an ice jam a few years ago. But they put a lot of work and effort into it. There was just a truck there working right now as we were paddling past. They're trying to raise some of that section of the trail so that it doesn't get impacted by flooding so much.
I did see the truck and I was kind of wondering what it was doing on the trail there.
Yeah.
So it's building the trail up to keep it higher than the flood.
Yes, they're working to increase the height of the trail so there's a little more buffer from the flooding there. You know, it's interesting, French Creek is pretty straight as it goes through Meadville, and French Creek had more of sort of a braided multi-channel path through Meadville prior to a lot of development. But then with the railroad coming to town, railroads want to be straight and not build bridges.
Sure.
So Meadville, French Creek is pretty channelized and runs pretty straight through Meadville, but as you get south out of town here, we're going to get into a couple of big meanders, a big S-curve in the creek, and that's actually where the ice jams start when we have these giant ice jams, because the ice breaks free and flows straight down this section but it gets to that S-curve and gets all jammed up. And that's how it gets backed up so much.
So when I was first brought home from the hospital after I was born in Groundhog's Day 1959, there was a big ice jam, and they were dynamiting the ice.
Yes.
And my mother said I would cry every time they would dynamite, because the house was close enough here, actually relatively close to where we are right now, and it would shake the windows and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it certainly was something. Now I can't remember that, but
Right.
I've been told the story many times.
Right. We don't do that anymore. And it's funny, you know, we've had some really serious ice jams in the last few years, and people are often asking us at the Conservancy what we're going to do about it or what someone else is going to do about it. And now Mother Nature takes its course. There's some geese up there with some babies.
Oh, I see them. Now it looks like those ones are a little afraid of us. They're running away.
Yep.
Jumping in the water.
A number of years ago, my husband and our 2 sons and I paddled, and we were down in this area, and there was a baby hooded merganser all by itself, and it swam along with us, followed us until we took out at Shaw's Landing.
Oh wow.
And my older son sat down on the bank, and that little baby duck was pretty sure that my son was his mother. It's like that book, Are You My Mother? And that little baby sat with us for a long time. It was an unforgettable experience.
I think I told you this story before. It was a little bit further north of where we put into the creek, but I was paddling down. This was several years back, and a deer jumped in the water and saw me, and then kind of spooked and went back up on the bank and ran down a little bit, jumped it, and that happened 3 or 4 times, and then it finally swam all the way across and got up on the bank on the other side and kind of looked at me and went, like, there you go, yeah.
It was irritated you were in the way of crossing.
It was like every time he was going to cross, he could see me and spook him a little bit more. And
That's funny.
yeah, those geese are still moving. They're way down there, but they're still moving in front of us.
I haven't seen any great blue herons yet this year. I don't know if it's just my timing or if maybe they're in a different part of the creek, but they are my favorite.
I was paddling over woodcock a number of times this year, and I did see one over at woodcock.
Yeah.
I think it lives there, and I think it's just kind of pretty much you pretty much can see it almost every time you go, I think.
Yeah. You can see some mussel shells over there on that little gravel bar there. Muskrats or otters or something, having a little feast.
That was dinner.
Yeah. People ask all the time, could you eat the freshwater mussels of French Creek? And you shouldn't. I don't know what they taste like, but I can't imagine they taste very good. But many of them are also protected, so.
There's that flock of geese in front of us. It's just about 100 yards ahead, and it just stand about 100 yards ahead.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a big group.
That looks like maybe 20 plus there.
Yeah. Definitely more than one mama. So that cut bank up there, maybe there'll be some turtles. I can't tell from here if those are turtles, but that's a place I often see them. Oh, they are turtles. Can you see straight ahead?
Yeah, I see.
Some of those are turtles, and it looks like the rocks are moving.
So when you see a rock walking around, it's probably a turtle.
That's right. So this is a place where you can see when there's no big trees making the bank stable, then the bank is eroding. At least some of these big down trees one of those places to be careful because the current wants to take you right into that snag there. All those trees, strainers.
What do you suppose those little holes are kind of cut into the bank up there? Is that a muskrat that does that?
I'm not sure. I think it could be. And there are bank swallows that will make nests there.
I saw several of those little holes back there, and I kind of assumed that.
Yeah, these larger burrows, I think, are muskrat. I hear a lot about river otters, but I never actually see river otters. I've seen one once, caught it on video, and I know there are otters on French Creek. We had a professor at Allegheny that was doing some research on otters, and she put some game cameras on some of our properties and saw evidence of otters, but I haven't seen them myself. So you can see how the character here is really different. It really starts to wind back and forth here. Big S curves. One of the things I love about paddling French Creek is how much it differs along the length. You know, when you're up in the Cambridge Springs area and it's just all these meanders back and forth, but a flatter area, then when you start getting down here, you start seeing the hilltops. It's a little deeper valley. Every section is unique, has its own different character.
I'll be darned, there's that flock of geese down there again. In the shadow down there at the bend.
I think they want to be on TV. They're enjoying the attention. Some more freshwater mussel shells over there on the right bank.
Oh, there's a shopping cart.
Yes, unfortunately. We'll make note and tell people when it's time for French Creek cleanup. So this is an interesting situation here, Duane. When we had our giant ice jam a few years ago, French Creek actually started cutting a new channel down here, and this is a newly formed island.
Wow.
The majority of French Creek is flowing to the left, but there is a new smaller channel that flows to the right, and that didn't exist before that giant ice jam a few years ago.
Well, that's interesting.
Just a reminder of how dynamic a river is, because
you can
it's
see
changing
how
all the time.
You can see how that bank is like kind of pretty freshly carved there.
Yeah. I haven't paddled to the right yet, but it does connect all the way through, I think. We have an eagle friend up there. Yeah, see, that's all new, freshly cut through there.
Looks like there's a tree blocking it. It's like that tree fell just exactly in just almost 90 degrees, you know, right across the block it there. And there's our goose family in front of us. Something just, oh, turtles.
Turtles.
1, 2, 3, 3 of them. Okay.
Those look like maybe soft-shell turtles.
Now, are those the eastern turtles, the dark-colored ones with the little colorful spots on the sides?
I have to admit, I really don't know my turtle species.
They didn't look like snapping turtles to me.
No,
they
no,
looked...
certainly not. I think they might have been soft-shell turtles. The water temperature is really nice.
Oh yeah. We usually watch the Erie news every day, and they always show the temperatures, including the temperature of Lake Erie. And it's like, whatever Lake Erie is, everything else is like 10 or 15 degrees warmer than that. It seems like it takes forever for it to warm up.
Yeah.
And then the same thing on the other end. It takes forever for it to cool down.
Yep. Yeah, it's always amazing to me how late in the season Lake Erie freezes, if at all. But there's a lot of cold water coming from the other Great Lakes
Right.
into
Right.
Erie.
Oh, here's some shells over here. Somebody was definitely having a snack.
Yeah. We had our big French Creek River of the Year sojourn this past Saturday, and there were a number of people who had never paddled on French Creek before, and they were remarking about how large the mussel shells were that they were seeing.
Wow.
And you know, French Creek has more than 24 species of freshwater mussels, and they range in size from pretty small to these really large shells that we're seeing along the way now. People were really pleasantly surprised by that.
Well, looks like maybe this is the other end of that island that you were talking about. It looks like the little creek coming out here.
We'll have to explore that another day.
I'm not sure what it was, but something jumped off that log there and splashed into water, saw me coming.
Oh, nice. We'll say it's an otter, because we always say it's an otter if we're not sure what it was.
I literally could not tell at all. I wasn't expecting to see something jump off the log there.
There's a lot of animals that, you know, people say they've seen on the creek, and I've not seen them, but fishers and weasels and all sorts of different animals.
Yeah, the last time I was out, I saw a beaver, which I don't remember ever seeing a beaver along the creek before.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of looks like those otters and everything, but they're kind of thicker and they're definitely dark brown.
Mm-hmm.
Because the otters are skinny and, you know, real flexible, you know, and this was not skinny and flexible at all. They have kind of a big tail, you know. And
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you see a beaver tail, you should definitely be able to tell it apart from a muskrat. But again, if you're one of these people who just drives over the bridges every day and don't give the creek any thought, you don't realize how many different species there are, how biologically diverse this is.
There goes a duck.
When we paddled last week, we saw dozens of kingfishers.
Oh wow.
It's really neat to watch them swoop down into the water.
Yeah. Were they fishing?
They were.
Okay. My boat's called a swift water, and it's specifically made for going down the creek, you know. And if we go through a spot like we just went through there, sometimes the water wants to turn me sideways. It wants to catch the back end of the boat and turn the boat sideways.
Yeah. Yeah, boats really, there are different qualities of boats for sure, and I learned that the hard way. Starting out, you know, you go to a big box store and get the Black Friday special for $129, and you're going to work really hard paddling that boat.
And that one's okay, just kind of for generic, for the kids to do some, you know, having a little bit of fun in a small area or whatever.
Yeah, but if you're paddling any kind of mileage, you really want to have a better quality boat that tracks better and is a little more stable in the water.
Boy, what a gorgeous day. My goodness.
Do you have a favorite section of the creek, Duane?
I just kind of like going on a creek, period. Yeah, it's just, I haven't really been on this part of the creek very often. My most common part is Sagertown to Meadville, because I live on the north side of town, and that's the part that I normally, but this is fun. This is really, it's like, we went under what, 5 bridges or whatever, and all kinds of traffic and everything, and then all of a sudden, bam, it's like you're out in the wilderness, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the French Creek Water Trail is about 78 miles of navigable creek from the Union City Dam down to the city of Franklin. And I've paddled the entire 78 miles, but not all at once.
Wow.
And I cannot pick a favorite section because, like you said, they're all different. They have really different character. I really enjoyed a trip we took a couple years ago doing the section from the Union City Dam down. That was new to me, and it's different in character as well. It's a really nice paddle, but we're so fortunate that just so close to home, we have so many places that we can put in the water and get out and enjoy a short or a long trip. It's great every section, I think.
Well, now you're convincing me that I need to get up there and try out that section of the creek, because I have not been on that part, so
okay,
I'd like
you
to
let
try
me
that.
know when you want to go.
Okay. The other part that I go deer hunting with extended family down near Utica, and I've never hit that part of the creek.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to hit that too.
So that's really different in character also, because that's where the valley is the deepest. You have the fastest drop in elevation of French Creek in that section.
Okay.
That's where there's the largest rapids. Still not
Okay.
not crazy rapids, but you got some moving water down there, some islands. So that's an exciting section to explore as well.
When we're down there for deer season, it's like the walls are like 45 degrees, and so we do deer drives because nobody ever, the deer, they just hang out there because nobody ever bothers them there.
Yeah.
And when we do the deer drive, it's almost every single time some deer get running, and
Sure.
That's definitely an area that you can tell the creek, made those hills the way they are,
Yeah.
forever, a million years ago. But
Well, a big difference in the topography in that section of the creek is that the glaciers that moved back and forth, in and out of northwest Pennsylvania didn't reach down that far. So once you get past a certain section on the creek, you're past where that impact from glaciation was, and you can really see the difference with the steep hills in the valley. The character of the creek valley is really different.
boy, it sure is.
We're right along Ernst Trail here, along this section of the creek.
Oh, I see it.
Sometimes
Okay.
when there's not so much vegetation, you might see a runner or a biker up there on the creek or on the trail. But if you're on the trail and looking down and see the red railroad bridge, this is the part of the creek that we're on.
Not too long till they have their 5K, 15K event. I think that's in July this year.
Yeah, that's right. That was such an important community resource throughout the pandemic. It's always been well used, but so many people wanted to find ways to recreate outdoors during the height of the pandemic, and so lots of people were on the Ernst Trail and lots of people got out on French Creek. We've really tried to provide a lot of paddling information for people. We have paper water trail maps that people can get at our office, or you can download a version. We have a story map that shows where all the launch locations are and how to get to them. A lot of paddling information, and we're always happy to answer questions.
That's
We're not
great.
pros, but we really just want people to enjoy the creek and be safe.
That's wonderful. Well, like the signs say, French Creek is a community treasure.
Most certainly is. In the River of the Year contest, we didn't just win, we really won. We had more than twice as many votes as the next closest competitor.
That's
but
amazing.
we knew that people in this area are just so proud and really treasure French Creek. Everybody has their story of swimming or wading in the creek or going fishing. And so we knew if we could make people aware of the contest, that they would want to cast their votes for French Creek.
I see some cars passing, and I see it looks like sprinklers up there. We're getting close to the Ernst farm, is that right?
I always think this section's funny. The creek makes a hard 90-degree right turn here. It's as you're paddling along, it looks like you're running out of creek, but it's good to have this bridge as a reference point for this takeout location because it comes up on you pretty quickly.
It sneaks right up, yeah.
Sneaks right up, and if you've gotten past it, then you're into another area that has a strainer and some rapids, so good to have this landmark. Hi there. Gorgeous day.
Made it! Maybe we should just do it again. Make sure we got some good footage.
Well, Brenda, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for paddling, and thank you for the beautiful paddle.
Oh, you bet.
I really
You
appreciate
bet.
that.
Good.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you folks at home for joining us today on Crawford County Outdoors, and we will talk to you next time.